Hey, welcome back. It is Vlogmas Day 5, 5th of December 2022. And wow, each day is amazing. Sorry, I just feel like I'm overflowing on it, and I don't want to sound insincere, but things have been really good. This coming up weekend, Mr. Siegfried Tieber, I just noticed his photograph on my wall back here, is going to be appearing at the Underground as a guest magician. And if you ever get a chance to catch his show, he is astounding. Really puts a lot of beauty and art into what he puts forward on stage. Highly recommended, Siegfried Tieber. I think he's mostly doing cruise ships these days. I believe he's got a lovely contract with the Disney line. I could be completely wrong about that, but that's what sparks to my memory. Anyway, he's going to be landbound for a weekend here at the top of the world in Estes Park, Colorado, at the Underground Theater. And I'm really looking forward to seeing him. Not just his show, but getting to spend a little time with a friend. I'll tell you, I first saw Mr. Tieber performing at the Magic Castle in the Cellar Theater. And he was trying new material. He was trying to polish new things. It's been a few years ago. And just to see the rapidness of his progress and the way he's grown into himself is nothing short of astounding. Very good artist. Don't mean to gush, but here we are. I call things as I see them. Credit where credit is due. In my heart, you're always going to see it right out there in the beginning with. Well, I've been reading your comments, and I've been reading some of the personal message you've been sending to me. And one of the things that most people are asking me about, at least right now, the topic du jour seems to be, where did you get started? How long have you been doing this? And what brought you here and why, and et cetera, and et cetera. Well, I'm going to tell you a little bit of an origin story to begin with. And who knows, in the future, next few days or the next set of Vlogmas that we're going to set out, maybe it'll go a little deeper. But here is where the story begins. There was a boy who came into this world at the hands of a holy woman in a holy place. Those are lyrics to a song that I love very much, and it really accurately describes how I came into this particular world. My birth mother was 16 years old, and she lived somewhere either in the Midwest or near the East Coast, somewhere in that foggy vicinity. She was the daughter of a farmer, a well-to-do family, from what I understand. I don't know details. I do not know names. I have chosen not to seek out that path. And I'll tell you that story another time, the reason why I decided not to. But she became pregnant at 16 years old, and her family sent her away to a convent, basically, a place where unwed mothers were taken care of and kept away from the gossiping lips of the town that they grew up in. Anyway, so hands of a holy woman in a holy place. I was born in a nunnery-ish, something, and put up for adoption. I was adopted by a lovely couple who could not have children of their own, but wanted to put love forward into the world. They wanted children to love, and I have no complaints about the way they brought me up, about the love that they gave to me. We did not always see eye to eye, as most children-parent relationships are, especially in teenage years, but they loved me as hard as they could, and they gifted me with respect. They gifted me with politeness and kindness. Those are things they stressed to me as I was growing up. They wanted things from me that I was unable to give. My father wanted me to be in sports. He was a big sports hero in college and in the Army, and he wanted me to follow in those footsteps. And I was just never. I didn't have the knack of it. One, it never held my interest for very long. Two, I was just not physically capable of playing sports. And he tried a lot of different things. We tried football, we tried baseball, a few others. And I was just not what I was meant to do. And that disappointed him, I believe, to some extent. I could see some of the disappointment in his face, even as like a 7, 8, 9-year-old. I was cut from from community teams because I just couldn't handle it. Couldn't do the work. Couldn't either understand or just physically be capable of doing what I'm doing or what I was trying to do. I was interested in books. I was interested in writing. And here is kind of where the story begins, and how I got to here, how I got to this place. 6 years old. My mother became concerned, first of all, because I didn't seem to have a lot of friends. I didn't have a big social circle. I played by myself a lot as a little boy. Big imaginations and castles in the air and such and so on, you know. So she thought if I had a hobby, if I had an activity, that perhaps I could make some friends and become a little more social. And she told me, and I vividly remember this conversation, you know, you're becoming a young gentleman, and a gentleman ought to know how to dance. There's going to come a time where you're going to maybe want to take a young lady out to a dance, to a social, to a party. And you should know how to dance. So I was enrolled at 6 years old into a class that involved ballroom dancing, jazz, and tap dancing. Yeah, it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun. I was in a class there were 7 boys and there were 7 girls. And of course we paired up to do the ballroom dancing, and they were all 6, 7 years old. We were the junior class. And so we learned some basic moves. We learned some steps and how to hold our hands and how to do the things. Now, the reason that I was signed up into tap dancing was because I asked for it. It was originally just going to be jazz and ballroom because, you know, that's how you meet people. It's eventually how I would assumedly meet a young lady who liked to ballroom dance as well. Still good at it. But I asked to be in tap because my mother watched this show. My whole family watched this show on Saturday or Sunday evenings called The Lawrence Welk Show. It was a kind of a variety music dance troupe. And unlike the other kind of variety shows that were around at the time, it was all very kind of settled around big band. There wasn't a lot of comedy, like comedy sketches and such, that a lot of the other variety shows had. It was centered around music and dance and vocals, and it was led by a German gentleman who played the accordion. And I narrowly missed being signed up for accordion lessons at one point because my mother just thought that was the ultimate instrument. But I missed doing that. And some of my closest friends, some of my best friends, play the squeeze box, plays the accordion, and do it masterfully. And there's every once in a while a twinge of regret I didn't get that. But my path became very important as well. Anyway, there was a guy on the show every week would do a tap dancing number. His name was Arthur Duncan. And he was amazing, just the style and the grace. And he always had this big smile on his face while he was doing what he was doing. And they'd set up little scenarios where he would come in and tap his way through things. And then at some point, I saw a gentleman called Gregory Hines, and he appeared on a completely different show and did a tap number. I believe it was the Cher or the Sonny and Cher show. And he did a tap dancing routine that just knocked me on my ass. It was the most beautiful, rhythmic, amazing thing I'd ever seen. I wanted to learn how to do that. So we were signed up for this class, and we learned a couple of songs. They introduced us to Broadway show tunes. I got some fancy shoes and some fancy costumes, and I learned my choreography. And I would stand in our driveway or in our garage because I was not allowed to wear my tap shoes in the house, and work on the rhythms and work on that and pretend I was Arthur Duncan and I was on TV and wanted to impress my mom, you know. So we had a recital after a couple of months of practice and training and teaching and rehearsing and all the other things that went with it. We had a rehearsal. I'm sorry, not a rehearsal, a recital. And I don't know if it was my father filming it, maybe one of my uncles filmed it, but there exists a film of that performance. And the opening song, the very first one we went out to do was called the Powder Puff Gang, or the Powder Puff Mob, one of the two. And it was purple shirts and black vests, and the girls wore yellow shirts, and it was just, and first time I ever wore a derby. Note, 6 years old. And if you watch the film, if you watch the video, you will see there's a stage and a curtain, and all you can see some of the families there, other people holding cameras, filming the recital and going on. And then you notice there's 13 little boys and girls lined up against the curtain, which I think is where we were supposed to be, lined up against the curtain, but they had their heads down, and they're looking at their feet, and they're trying to keep up with the music, and trying to keep up with the moves they're supposed to be doing, and trying really, really hard not to die of stage fright. 13 in a row, just like that, just, and then getting through it. 13 in a row. And number 14, one little asshole up at the front of the stage, taking all of the spotlight, making up his own moves, singing along to the music that was going on out loud, head thrown back, arms out wide, channeling Arthur Duncan through his feet, and trying to pull all the attention in the room to himself. Not a lot has changed in my life. I'm still trying to pull all the attention to the stage that I'm on, not necessarily the room that I'm in. I can stand up in front of hundreds of people. I can stand up in front of thousands of people. I can command with my voice, and I can show the skill that I've got in my hands, and I can entertain them and feel completely comfortable. But if you put me in a room in the middle of those people, even a dozen or 24 people, in a room where I'm supposed to be social and supposed to talk and chat and I get terrified. I close up. You'll often find me sitting in a chair over on the side of the room, or standing in a corner, avoiding the small groups. I can't explain that. My stage fright happens off the stage. But anyway, so we had this recital, and we had our 2 or 3 songs, and I remember getting scolded by the teacher that, you should at least stay in the line with everyone else. And you're, I don't know what moves you were doing out there, but they certainly weren't the ones you were taught. Very disappointed in you. And I remember her she was kind of right here, kind of bent over, talking to me and telling me how disappointed she was that I wasn't doing it right. And I understood what she was saying, and part of me was like, oh, I'm sorry I disappointed you. But the majority of me was like, I was on stage, and all those people were looking at me, and the lights were in my eyes, and I could feel the love coming back across the footlights. And I want that feeling again. So sometime, somewhere that evening, there was a gentleman in the audience who was directing a community theater, local community theater. Might have been the Charlotte Little Theater, but my brain isn't quite, and that memory is not there. I remember doing it, but I don't recall where we did it. Anyway, he was a director for a community theater, and he was putting on a play, casting a play at the time, called The Music Man. Now, The Music Man has a role for a little boy who can carry a tune and sing a song, and has some lines to, go back and forth with the main people in the show. And he saw me on that stage, and he saw me breaking the wall, and he saw me, eating up the footlights and eating up the stage. And he talked to my mom and asked if it was okay, and tested me out, gave me some lines to learn, and that was my very first play, The Music Man. Gary, Indiana, not Louisiana. And I had the greatest time. And that's what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. And that's what I did with the rest of my life. I was in plays. I was in musicals. I surprised people, because a lot of people didn't think, looking at me at first or interacting with me off the stage in my terrible, terrible antisocial kind of introverted self, were unsure that I could hack it on the stage. And then got surprised. plays and musicals. I was in a couple of motion pictures as a youth. I was in rock bands. I was in rock, even though I couldn't play an instrument. I was in a couple of rock bands that had a lot of fun. Didn't go so far, but man, I had a lot of fun doing it. I was a street performer. I didn't pick up a deck of cards. I didn't become a magician, until I was like 27 years old, which is really pretty late for most magicians, for most people that become. A lot of people pick it up as children and develop that interest in that hobby and then take it to a whole other place. And I guess I should tell you this story too while I'm at it, because it certainly ties into the origin of everything that led me here. So I worked most of my work. My dad, first of all, made me take fast food jobs when I was a teenager because he wanted me to deal with the public, and he wanted me to know how difficult it was to make money, and that I should, apparently I should suffer for a bit before, going off to do something that I wanted to do. And I don't disagree with that philosophy. That was a very interesting time. I did the McDonald's thing. I worked at Wendy's for a little while, worked at Arby's for a little while, and so on. Then I lucked into working for a movie theater, Capri Theater in Charlotte, North Carolina. My boss was Kenny Atkins. I was a movie junkie. I was there all the time. And the Capri only had 3 auditoriums, and they had the big, first run pictures. And I was always there on opening day, and they kind of got to know me. And Kenny, who was my boss, hired me or offered me a job. I couldn't have been 15, 16 years old. And I took the job, and I worked there for many years. Worked under Kenny for, I got married in 88, 16 at 81, so at least 7 or 8 years working for the film industry, for the movie theater. And man, there's a whole book full of stories there of working in a theater. I'll tell you those someday. But I did that. Those were my jobs. And then after getting married, I figured, I should try to come up in the world and also not be working till late at night a lot of times. So I got a job for a store called, in there was working at Record Bar, and there's tons of jobs. But this actually leads somewhere. Worked for a store called Storehouse, which was a furniture store. And I was the head delivery guy. I would take furniture to people's homes that they had purchased and put them together and put them in the rooms they wanted and so on. And from that job, I got hired up to Mecklenburg Furniture Company, which at the time was the longest running furniture company in the Carolinas. I mean, it was a very, very old, respectable kind of a place. 4 or 5 floors of furniture. Really good stuff to really cheap stuff. But I got on as part of the delivery team there, and I moved furniture into people's houses. And I got offered a job. This is kind of murky because it happened really fast. Like every big change in my life, like every new adventure, it happened fast. I got an offer. Okay, back up one step. There was a televangelist, I think the very first televangelists in the world, in Charlotte, North Carolina, the Jim and Tammy show, Jim and Tammy Faye Baker. And they had a resort near Charlotte called Heritage. And if you recall, if you don't, you can look up the history, Heritage was besieged by scandals. They were mismanaged, they were misrun, and they folded, and they cost a lot of people a lot of money. Right after that entire scenario, that whole thing folded, the Heritage got bought by as I recall, a group of Malaysian businessmen who wanted a family-friendly, Christian-based resort to carry on. And part of that was an entertainment section. And a pastor, friend of mine, got offered the job of being the entertainment director there, the children's entertainment, family entertainment director there. And he, in turn, hired me to write scripts, to write songs with my friend Ted Loring, and to act and produce plays and musicals and things for this family resort, New Heritage USA. I'm going to tell you, the salary he offered me, or the salary that I took, was $20,000 a year. This was 1980, no, sorry, get it right. It was the year my mother died, 1992. 30 years ago. 1992. I was offered a job. It was at the beginning of the summer of 1992 to write, self-direct, produce, get on stage, act, sing these Christian-based lesson type plays. You know, be kind, help your neighbor, love God, etc. And that job lasted from like early June through Christmas. And around Christmas time, the gates got locked. But to put it in perspective, my salary was $20,000 a year. And it was more money than I had ever made at any time at any job I'd ever had. And, you know, you adjust for inflation. That's just the way it is. So 1992, somewhere in that, my mother was killed. And I'll tell you that story pretty soon. But the Malaysian businessmen were not able to keep it open. They were not able to maintain what they had envisioned. So they closed their gates, literally came to work to find the gates closed one day. But right before that had happened, somewhere around the Thanksgiving time, early December, like right around when it is now, I wrote this short play that involved a street performer, that involved some guy out on the street hustling people going by, showing them tricks and card tricks and reading their minds and so on. A street performer. And so I wrote that part in. And to learn how to play that part, I went to the Mecklenburg County Public Library and I checked out a couple of books on magic tricks. And I learned a couple of magic tricks. Very first time ever picking up a deck of cards in order to entertain with them. The play, we rehearsed it. I rehearsed the magic stuff. And the play never got put on stage because they closed. Well, when they closed, I had to go home to my young wife and our 2 children. And I had to tell them, well, my job is over. My dream job of writing and acting and singing and everything else is done. I'm going to call the furniture company and see if I can get my old job back, and we'll just do the best we can. And one afternoon, after coming back from being declined some jobs, the economy wasn't the greatest at the time, or the job search in Charlotte didn't go so well. I looked at my wife and I said, what if I just took the table that I was going to use for the play and I went uptown in Charlotte and just played this character, just did this magic show for people walking by. Maybe I could make a couple of bucks in tips. Maybe I could buy some groceries on the way home. Maybe I could buy some diapers for the kids. I should at least give it a try. I mean, maybe I could have a little bit of fun with it because I'm feeling kind of down about the doors shut in my face and, you know, my dream job going away. And she said, yeah, why don't you give it a shot? And I took my little table and I took a deck of cards and I took a couple of tricks that I had purchased for the play itself. And I went up and I set up right at the epicenter of downtown. And took a while to stop the first couple. But I stopped the first couple and I made them laugh. And I told some jokes that I had written and I showed them some tricks and they gave me $5. And I was surprised. I was expecting $1 or some change or something, you know. I underestimated. And so I stayed. I stayed for like 3 hours or so. And I drew some crowds and I had some decent people, decent sized groups of people that came up and watched. And I realized, hey, I'm actually pretty good at this. I had never actually put it forward in front of someone to try and fool them with a magic trick. I wanted to entertain them, but I had even written jokes when I didn't fool them, so that I would have a fallback. Like, yeah, of course, I knew that wasn't gonna fool you. You're a very smart human being, but et cetera, blah blah blah. And if I could make them laugh, I made $86 over the course of about 2.5 to 3 hours after I finally stopped the first couple, and kind of snowballed after that. I made $86 on my first night. And I didn't know that till I got back to the car and was counting out the cash that was in my hat. And I sat there in my car just stunned, just flabbergasted that I had made. I thought if I could just make $20, I could buy some groceries, I could buy some diapers, and everything will be okay. And I can keep looking for another job. I can come out here for a couple of nights in the evenings until I find a job that'll give me a salary, or let me work. And I never found another job. I started coming out 3 nights a week, 4 nights a week. And I got better because I don't care how it sounds. It's going to sound arrogant, but I never watched another magician to see how they were doing things. I read the book, I read how this is done. And then I took the acting part and the character that I was trying to play, and I did the tricks, and I fooled the hell out of people, but I made them laugh and I made them think. And it worked. And I could pay my rent, and I could buy my family groceries, and I could take care of my responsibilities while doing card tricks. And the restaurants around the spots that I was working started sending me out food. You make us happy. We come out and we watch you making the people laugh. And here's a pizza. Here's some chicken wings. Here's a sandwich to take home with you. And one of them found out I had kids at home, and they gave me dinner. They gave me like a box of something to take home for everybody, And then they were like, hey, if you ever need some water, if you need to use the bathroom, you come in, whatever you want, we'll give you dinner. Would you mind, if somebody asks, hey, what's good to eat around here? Maybe you mention our name, I started doing that, and the people started going in saying, hey, the magician says you got really good pizza. The magician says you've got really good Chinese food. And the manager started coming out and giving me cash. And then I read somewhere, I think it was in Genie magazine, because I think I started subscribing to Genie magazine around that time, mid-93. And I saw that there were magicians that were working inside restaurants. They were going table to table, or they were hanging around the bar, and they were keeping people who were waiting for tables entertained, so they wouldn't mind the wait so much. And they would go over to the tables sometimes who were waiting for food to come out, and the kitchen was a little behind, and they would entertain with the tables, and that made people forget how long they were waiting for their food. And so one night, one of the managers of one of my favorite restaurants that was there came out and gave me $20 and said, thank you for sending us the business. And I pitched him. I'm like, I see you got lines, you got a waiting area, you got the bar. There's some places in the country that have magicians working at the bar, working around the bar, the waiting areas. And he's like, oh my God, what a great idea. How much would that cost me? And I don't know, just right there. And the first thing that popped into my head was $75 a night. I'll come in for a couple of hours, $75 a night. Because I'm like, we're a couple of hours. That's what, $35 an hour? That's really good, right? That's a good, a lot of people don't make that. A lot of people don't make that. And he's like, oh, I don't know. He's like, how about if you come in for 3 hours, I'll give you $100 and I'll give you food to take home. Sold, done. And then I got another restaurant, and I was cutting my time between, working out on the street and trying new material and writing new magic and reading more books. And that's how it started. That's how it started in the story. That's just the beginning of where it all happened. My background is in acting, being up on stage. I found my home at 6 years old. And I never wanted to be anything else. I had, I don't know, I mean, there were times where I'm like, man, it would be great to be a bar magician. And then I became one. And man, it would be great to work corporate things and trade shows and where the big money is. And I did that too. But the goal was to be on stage, to put my heart out, to shine lights on the heart of me, and to incidentally take care of my responsibilities, pay my rent, pay my mortgage, pay for my kids' school. And I did it. And that's how it began. You want to know more? Put some comments in the comments section. Ask me about anything. I'll be happy to answer the questions. As you can see, I can ramble on for some time. Hey, happy Vlogmas. Hope you enjoyed it. We'll talk soon.